The fog in Oakhaven didn't just roll in from the coast. It seemed to exhale from the very earth itself, thick and smelling of damp pine and old secrets. It was a town of 500 people, 3 churches, and one unspoken rule. We don't talk about the man in the charcoal coat. In Oakhaven, everyone knew who the killer was. We saw him every morning at Miller's Bakery, buying a sourdough loaf and nodding politely to the sheriff. We saw him at the Sunday markets, inspecting the heirloom tomatoes with the precision of a surgeon. His name was Elias Thorne. He lived in the Victorian house at the end of Blackwood Lane, the one with the perfectly manicured lawn and the basement windows painted black. From the inside, the first disappearance happened 12 years ago. Young Sarah Miller, the baker's daughter, went out to pick wildflowers and never came back. Then it was the drifter who took a job at the gas station. Then the librarian. Every 2 years, like clockwork, Oakhaven lost a soul. And every 2 years, the morning after a disappearance, Elias Thorne would be seen scrubbing his porch with bleach, whistling a tune that sounded like a funeral march. "Morning, Elias," Sheriff Miller would say, his voice cracking just a little, his eyes looking everywhere except at the dark stains fading under the bleach. "Morning, Sheriff," Elias would respond, his voice as smooth as polished marble. "Terrible business about your daughter. My prayers are with you." The sheriff would nod, tip his hat, and walk away. Because in Oakhaven, the truth was more dangerous than a lie. The town was built on a foundation of quiet, prosperity, a gift granted by the Thorne family generations ago. The mills, the land, the very blood in our veins felt tied to the darkness in that house. To accuse him was to dismantle the world we lived in. We weren't just neighbors. We were accomplices in a silent contract. The tension reached a breaking point on the hottest July on record. The heat didn't just bring sweat. It brought the smell. It started near the creek behind the Thorne estate. A heavy, sweet, cloying scent that no amount of summer breeze could carry away. Little Toby, a 10-year-old who didn't yet know how to keep his mouth shut, was the first to find the garden. He had chased a stray ball over the rusted iron fence of the Thorne backyard. When he came back, his face was the color of chalk. He didn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, he only whispered 4 words. "The trees have eyes." The town didn't gather in the town square to protest. We gathered in the shadows of the local tavern, voices hushed. "He's getting sloppy," whispered Martha the grocer. "The smell is reaching the main road. The tourists will notice." "It's not the tourists I'm worried about," Miller replied, staring into his whiskey. "It's the fact that he's stopped hiding. He left a glove on my porch last night. Sarah's glove. The one she was wearing the day he couldn't finish." The realization hit the room like a physical blow. Elias Thorne wasn't just killing anymore. He was taunting us. He knew we were cowards. He knew that for 12 years, we had traded the lives of our children for the survival of our town. And now, he wanted to see if we had a breaking point. That night, the fog felt heavier than usual. I was walking home from the tavern when I saw him. Elias was standing under the lone streetlight on Blackwood Lane. He wasn't moving. He was just staring at the sheriff's office. In his hand, he held a long silver blade that caught the moonlight, shimmering like a malevolent star. He turned his head slowly, catching my gaze. He didn't run. He didn't hide the knife. He smiled, a thin, razor-sharp expression that told me he knew exactly what I was thinking. "It's a beautiful night for a reckoning, isn't it?" he called out. I didn't answer. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned, locking every bolt on my door. But as I sat in the dark, I realized the terrifying truth. The killer wasn't the only monster in Oak Haven. We were the ones who fed him. We were the ones who kept his secrets. And tonight, the hunger had finally outgrown the cage. The morning after the encounter on Blackwood Lane, the silence in Oak Haven was different. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a sleepy village. It was the suffocating silence of a tomb. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and rotting earth. When the sun rose, it didn't bring warmth, only a harsh, pale light that exposed the cracks in every front door and the fear in every eye. Sheriff Miller didn't show up for work. His patrol car sat idling in his driveway. The driver's side door hung open, and a single, muddy footprint was pressed into the leather upholstery. By noon, the rumor had spread. The man who was supposed to protect us had finally been claimed by the man we all protected. A crowd gathered outside the general store. No one spoke at first. We stood in a circle, looking at our boots, until Martha finally broke. "We can't just wait for the sun to go down again," she hissed, her voice trembling. "He took the sheriff. He's coming for us one by one now, because he knows we won't fight back. He's bored of the hunt, so he's turned it into a slaughter." "And what do you suggest, Martha?" an old farmer asked, his voice weary. "We go to the police in the next county? They'll ask why we waited 12 years. They'll ask about the bodies under our floorboards. We go down with him." That was the leash Elias Thorne held us by. He hadn't just murdered people. He had involved us in the aftermath. He had paid for the new roof on the church with blood money. He had donated the land for the school that was built over a shallow grave. We weren't just witnesses. We were his infrastructure. Suddenly, the bell at the top of the hill began to toll. It was the bell from the old chapel on the Thorne estate. A sound that hadn't been heard in decades. Clang, clang, clang. It was an invitation, driven by a mixture of paralyzing fear and a strange, morbid curiosity. The townspeople began to move. We walked like a funeral procession up the winding road of Blackwood Lane. The Victorian house loomed over us, its black-painted windows reflecting nothing. The front doors were wide open. As we stepped into the foyer, the smell hit us. A cocktail of expensive cologne, old paper, and copper. Elias Thorne was sitting in a high-backed velvet chair in the center of the drawing room. He looked immaculate. His charcoal coat was buttoned to the chin, and his silver hair was combed back perfectly. In front of him, laid out on a long mahogany table, were hundreds of photographs. We gasped as we drew closer. They weren't just photos of the victims. They were photos of us. There was a photo of Martha taking a bribe in a brown envelope 5 years ago. There was a photo of the town council signing off on the disappearance of the librarian as a voluntary relocation. There was a photo of every one of us turning up, our heads away, while a scream echoed in the night. "You see," Elias said, his voice echoing in the vaulted room. "I never forced any of you to stay silent. I offered a choice, and every single time, Oak Haven chose its comfort over its soul. You think I am the killer. I am merely the hand. You are the heart that pumps the blood." He stood up, the silver blade from the night before resting casually in his palm. "The sheriff is in the cellar. He's still alive, mostly. He's waiting for one of you to come down and finish what you started 12 years ago. He knows too much now. He wants to confess. If he speaks, the mills close. The church falls. Your lives end." He tossed the knife onto the table. It slid across the wood, stopping right in front of me. "Who wants to preserve our way of life?" Elias asked, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying, dark joy. "Who wants to keep Oak Haven safe?" The room went cold. I looked at the knife, then at the faces of my neighbors. I saw the greed in Martha's eyes. I saw the desperation in the farmer's face. In that moment, the monster wasn't the man in the charcoal coat. The monster was the collective shadow of 500 people who were too afraid to be poor and too cowardly to be good. The floorboards creaked as someone stepped forward. It wasn't me. It was the local school teacher, a woman who had taught Sarah Miller how to read. Her hand reached for the silver handle of the blade. The school teacher, Mrs. Gable, gripped the silver handle with a white-knuckled intensity. Her eyes were vacant, fixed on the dark doorway leading to the cellar. She didn't look like a murderer. She looked like a woman trying to save her world. As she descended the stairs, the rest of us stood frozen in the drawing room, held captive by the heavy silence and the mocking smile of Elias Thorne. A few moments later, a muffled sound rose from the depths of the house. A sharp, stifled cry that was quickly cut short by a dull thud. When Mrs. Gable returned, her floral dress was splattered with a dark, rhythmic pattern. She didn't drop the knife. She placed it back on the mahogany table with the care of someone returning a borrowed book to the library. No one spoke. No one cried out. The pact was sealed in fresh blood. "Excellent," Elias whispered, standing up. "Now we are truly a family. There are no secrets left between us, because there is no us and me anymore. There is only Oakhaven." He walked to the window and pulled back the heavy velvet curtains. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the town below. "The fog will be thick tonight," he continued. "It will cover the tracks. It will hide the cellar. And tomorrow, we will tell the world that Sheriff Miller grew depressed and left town, just like the others. We walked out of that house one by one, descending Blackwood Lane like ghosts. We went back to our homes, back to our dinners, and back to our beds. But sleep didn't come. In the weeks that followed, Oakhaven changed. It became the most perfect town in the country. The streets were spotless. The crime rate was zero. The prosperity Elias had promised arrived in waves of new investments and quiet wealth. But the price was visible in the faces of the people. No one looked each other in the eye anymore. When we passed Elias Thorne on the street, we didn't just nod. We bowed our heads. He was no longer just a neighbor we feared. He was our king. The horror of Oakhaven wasn't that a killer lived among us. The horror was that he had turned us into a mirror of himself. We became a town of watchers, a community of shadows. We found ourselves patrolling our own neighborhoods, not to keep out the danger, but to ensure that no one else spoke out of turn. We became the guards of our own prison. Years passed. The fog never truly lifted. Travelers who pass through Oakhaven often comment on how quiet it is, how remarkably polite the citizens are, and how the town seems frozen in a golden, eerie perfection. They see the beautiful church, the thriving mill, and the man in the charcoal coat who sits on a park bench, feeding the birds with a gentle smile. They don't see the black-painted windows. They don't hear the scratching beneath the floorboards of the town hall. And they never notice that in Oakhaven, there are no graveyards, only gardens that grow far too well for the soil they are planted in. The town knows the killer. It knows him because it sees him every time a citizen looks into a mirror. Elias Thorne didn't destroy Oakhaven. He simply invited it to be honest about what it was willing to do to survive. And as the fog rolls in every night, we realize the ultimate truth. The monster didn't come from the outside. He was invited in, and now he will never, ever leave.